Okay. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I've enjoyed it. I've seen it a few times now. But it just also highlights, doesn't it, the sheer skill level that's required from these stubborn beasts of burden. Okay, all right, everyone, settle down from your mirth. We know it's Palm Sunday. We know that Jesus rides a donkey. But I want to ask the question this morning, what does it mean at a deep level? How is it related to deep truth, fundamental truth and symbolism? I was musing on Luke's account of the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And I'm like, oh look, here comes the King of Peace, all humble and stuff. Humble. The same word that's used to describe the meek inheriting the earth. And I don't know about you, but I don't like the word meek. Do I get a wave of an amen? I don't like the word meek because it sounds what it rhymes with, weak. The meek shall inherit the earth. But then I did a little bit of digging around and I discovered something so absolutely beautiful, that the word meek is like restrained power. Not just lily-livered chicken. Restrained power, like someone who's in control of his faculties, and he has a sword and his hand is on the handle, but the sword is in the scabbard, and he could smite in his power, but it's restrained power. So here comes the King of the universe, all humble and riding on a donkey. I love that idea. Anyway, that was just a side note. So he's riding on the donkey, he's the king, he's all humble and stuff. And then I thought, hang on a minute, wait a cotton picking minute, what have we got here? I noticed a right old shocker, and I made a kind of reference to this in the reading. Chapter 19, verse 28 begins with, after Jesus said this. And I went, I wonder what he just said before this meek, humble king got onto his donkey. I wonder what he said. It must have been lovely. It must have been meek. It must have been wise. It must have been loving. Let's have a look what he said. It's the parable of the 10 minas. Okay, I needed to remind myself of this parable. I'm not going to go into the details here about the parable. Suffice to say this, that it doesn't end well for some of the servants in this parable. Chapter 19, verse 27. Just take a quick glance over that. It says, but the enemies of mine who did not want me to be king over them, bring them here and kill them in front of me. Wait a minute. Kill them in front of me? What? Then I did some more digging, and it's not just kill them, it's slay them. It's slaughter them. This is a very strong word. And it's the only time that word for kill, slaughter, slay is used. That particular word is used. And that should alert us to something unique and distinctive about what's going on. The only time it's used. So therefore, something is afoot with this word. Something is in the wind. Yes, something there to ponder about what the scriptures are saying to us. Bring them here and slay them in front of me. It's like, whoa! And when he had said these things, he went on ahead up to Jerusalem riding on his donkey. What is going on in Luke's account? And the other three Gospels have different ways into this story, and we'll look at those in the coming years. That will be great to look at those and see how the Gospel is shaping deep truth, deep symbolism, and deep reality. This reminded me of the story of two hunters who had gone into the woods. One of the hunters suddenly collapsed, and his eyes rolled into the back of his head, and he stopped moving, and he stopped breathing. And his friend who was with him panicked and got out his mobile phone and dialed 999 and gasped out of breath to the operator and said, "I think my friend is dead. What do I do?" In a calm, soothing voice. This is what you need at this moment, isn't it, church? In an emergency situation, you need a calm voice of the operator on the other end of the phone saying, just take it easy, take a deep breath, I can help you. First, let's make sure he's dead. So that the phone goes quiet and the operator can hear distant footsteps. Then he hears a gunshot. Bang! Then the footsteps come back and he said, "Right, he's dead. Now what?" All right. So now we come to the King of Peace and his nice donkey ride after slaying his enemies. Okay, we're back on safe territory. We like Palm Sunday. But after reading that parable just before, which we haven't done this morning, but we can do anyway, we should be like trembling with fear about what the symbolism of Jesus riding into Jerusalem is about. We should be stunned, rocked to the core. We should be like James Bond's brother, shaken and stirred. But Luke, who has put Luke's gospel together, is a literary genius. I want you to look at how he frames this story. Take a quick sneaky peek over at verse 44 of chapter 19. Jesus is now speaking a prophecy over Jerusalem, and he says this: "Your enemy will surround you and will dash you to the ground, you and your children within the walls. They will not leave one stone upon another, because you did not recognize the time of God's coming to you." And then, of course, straight after this humble, meek king riding on a peaceable donkey goes into the temple courtyard, overturns all the tables, there's money and pigeons flying everywhere. Then he makes a whip and he drives out the changers and the sellers of pigeons and goats and whatnot. Not a very peaceable act, would you say, for this meek king. We've got extreme violence at both ends of the donkey ride in Luke's gospel. I find that fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Okay, but you could be saying, Richard, calm down. This 1 year lockdown has got to you. You're losing your mind. It's Palm Sunday. Tell us about Jesus riding the donkey. Well, if I could politely refuse that, I am doing that actually. But I want to remind us of something that P.T. Forsyth said. As we think about all of these things, we don't hold the gospel. And some of you might need to really get this truth into you today. We don't hold the gospel. The gospel holds us. Amen. The gospel holds us. That is such a powerful truth. The gospel holds us. Which means we must widen the scope of what the gospel writers are doing so that we can see. Jesus is the King of peace in restrained, meek power, riding into Jerusalem to die. It is deeply, deeply symbolic action. As I said, the three other gospel writers make similar but effective points as well. So 1 week from now, we will be celebrating Easter, Resurrection Morning. We've got to go through Easter week to get there. 1 week from now, the cheering crowds will be baying for his death. So much for the truth of crowds. In 1 week from now, they will not want Jesus to be king over them like they do when he's riding the donkey. And it will be they who will slay him. He will be the slaughtered lamb. He will be thrown to the ground. Do you remember when Jesus said, "Tear down this temple and I will build it, I will raise it up in 3 days"? And then there's a discussion and the disciples are saying, "We don't understand. This took years to build, Jesus. Have you got no sense? Have you never read history? Do you not know how buildings and architecture work?" And he said, no, you fools, I'm talking about the temple of my body, you see. So look at chapter 19, verse 44. Your enemies will not leave one stone upon another. They will tear me down. I'm going to absorb the prophecy given to Jerusalem. It's not going to be the king with power that's going to unleash the sword of judgment. The king with power will be the one judged. It's amazing. We're meant to see this story as a mirror, a mirroring of the surrounding stories of what God is doing. They will tear me down. Look at chapter 20, verse 17. The stone the builders rejected. The stone that the builders rejected is the capstone. So let's just summarize now. They will slay Jesus, their king. They will tear down Jesus, their temple. They will dash Jesus to the ground, dead and buried. Not just to the ground, but through the ground. And it's all contained in these verses. I just want to draw out one more thing before I finish. The people were praising, right? Chapter 19, verses 37 and 38. Now the Pharisees were a bit cheesed off by this praising. I mean, they're not the fun lovers, are they, that history paints them out to be? But at this point, they're a bit cheesed off with Jesus and joy. So they tell Jesus to tell his disciples to be quiet. And just as a kind of side note, this should warn any of us in church who are quick to raise the finger of silence to any distracting noise. Otherwise, God will cause the very stones on which the church building is built to praise instead. But look at Jesus' reply, verse 40. The chance to have noise in the church at the moment would be a fine thing, wouldn't it? Look at verse 40. Jesus replies famously, if I tell you, if they keep quiet, the very stones will burst out into praise. I don't know if you've noticed how many times the stones idea have been referenced already. 3 different mentions of stones. Verse 40, verse 44, and one that we haven't heard because I was being a little bit cheeky, in chapter 20, verse 17. I've mentioned it already, actually. So they may slay their king. They will tear down the body of his temple. They will dash Jesus to the ground. And this king, will be the stone of offense that is rejected. And this got me thinking about stones now. One that makes its appearance on Easter Sunday morning. And yes, I know it's Palm Sunday, but I'm going to jump the gun because we do know how the story ends, right? So it's okay to mention that Jesus rises from the dead, the greatest historical fact attested in human history. Jesus rises from the dead. So the stone that we encounter here is the one that is rolled away and reveals the empty tomb. But to get there, of course, we've got to journey through Easter week. Before that stone of Easter Sunday, we must experience that slaughter of Good Friday. So yeah, we can say Jesus makes a triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And we are invited to see all the ways that the stories of the Gospels are stitched and sewn together, that we may make the connections to see how deeply truthful and deeply symbolic the Gospel is. So he makes his triumphal entry into Jerusalem so that he can, a week later, make his triumphal exit out of the tomb. After they've done the worst to him. After he has fulfilled his own prophecy, where we thought he was talking about others. But it all happened to him. It all happened to Jesus. So I just want to say this to finish. This is the gospel that we must experience, church. We must experience a real gospel, a real lived passage from death to life, an overwhelming, final, comforting, kindling, subduing, irrepressible, unmistakable sense of what God has forever and decisively done for us. Remember, the gospel carries us before we carry the gospel. Jesus, as Good Shepherd, carries us. It's just brilliant. And all of this is in Christ's life, death, and resurrection. And this is a sense far more overwhelming than the sense of anything that we are doing for it. I guess all I'm trying to say is we must experience this gospel. We must never domesticate it. We must make the links with ourselves, and especially if we teach young people, get them to see the links. Make it raw. Show them what meekness looks like. Power under control. Restrained power. And the only other thing that I've got to say is, I guess, happy Palm Sunday, everyone. God bless you. I hope that has enriched you.